And there was one other play-in game that took place yesterday. The Clippers and the Minnesota Timberwolves. So if you only watched the highlights of last night's game, you'd probably come away thinking Minnesota Timberwolves won the NBA Finals. Not really, but they celebrated like it. You had Patrick Beverley and Anthony Edwards climbing on the scorer's table, taking off the shirts, riling up the fans, throwing their jersey into the stadium. And that's what Patrick Beverley's going to do. And I'm going to touch on his performance. And obviously, it was a highly emotional and emotionally charged game for him personally, going up against the Clippers, going up against the team that basically said, sorry, sayonara to you. They didn't want to pay him. And so this was personal for Patrick Beverley. And he obviously let his emotions overflow at the end of the game in probably what was the most overrated celebration for a play-in game. It's not even like they won a series where even if you win a first-round series, we think that's over the top. To win one play-in game, to have that type of celebration was a bit over-dramatic, but needless to say, they've clinched it, and they clinched the 7th seed. They're in the playoffs officially. So what was striking to me about this game was, for the majority of the game, this looked like your typical Clippers team from a season ago. They led by 10 with about 8:45 left. And it was a surprise that they allowed that game to slip away, because that's typically a team, what we've seen from them over the last postseason run that they had under Ty Lue, was that's a game that they're going to typically close down the stretch. They were playing confidently on the road. They're executing, especially in the half court, which is where they've excelled. Without Kawhi all year, they've just gotten Paul George back over the last couple of weeks, reintegrating him into the lineup. But this was surprising that they couldn't close this deal. But that's partly because you have to give credit to Minnesota for the guys that stepped up on their end. I thought that the difference in the game in the second quarter, D'Angelo Russell and Naz Reid kind of saved the day for the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first half, because Karl Anthony Towns was playing recklessly and careless basketball. He's committing all these careless personal fouls. He committed 4 fouls and only had 2 points in the first half. 4 fouls in the first half. Anthony Edwards was battling foul trouble as well in the first half. He had 3 fouls in the first half. So the final couple minutes of the second quarter, you had D'Angelo Russell orchestrating everything and Naz Reid cleaning up the glass. And I want to give credit to D'Angelo Russell because, and I mean this in the most complimentary way, this is not to throw shade on him, this is not to knock him as a player. I truly thought that last night was the first legitimate time in his career that he lived up to the contract that he signed. He signed a 4-year, $117 million contract a couple years ago when he did that sign and trade with the Golden State Warriors and the Brooklyn Nets. And he scored 29 points. He was controlling the pace. He was controlling the tempo. They were running the offense through him, especially when Karl Anthony Towns couldn't stay on the floor or Anthony Edwards wasn't out there. They allowed D'Angelo Russell to, again, just orchestrate and get them into sets and create shots for himself off the dribble or to create switches with his dribble. And I thought that he did a magical job slowing down the pace in the half court, getting the Timberwolves into offensive sets. And I have to give him credit because he signed a contract that was an all-star caliber worthy contract, and he played probably arguably his best game of his career in his most meaningful and most impactful game that he's ever played in his career. We forget he played in Kobe's last game. It feels like ages ago. But D'Angelo Russell stepped up to the plate, and he's what allowed the Timberwolves, along with the next guy I'm going to talk about, to kind of spark them on that 16-2 run and then a 21-5 run to close the game. And so this is what kind of leads into Anthony Edwards, because Anthony Edwards has arrived. This was kind of Anthony Edwards' postseason coming out party. 30 points. Apologies. I had to sneeze for a sec. 30 points, 10 for 21 from the floor, 5 for 11 from the three-point line. He was explosive, getting all the way to the rim, hitting step-back threes. He scored 9 points in the fourth quarter to help close the deal. A couple big late shots for the Timberwolves to close the deal. He was one of those 5 guys I thought coming into the season was going to have a breakout year. It was going to take that next step. And he's backed it up. He's backed it up. He's playing with all kinds of confidence. And it's great to see because we haven't seen the Minnesota Timberwolves, again, qualify and advance to the postseason. We saw it in a long time. We saw it happen once in 2018 where you had Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins that flamed out, fizzled out pretty quickly. Prior to that, you have to go back to the Kevin Garnett days back in 2004 was the last time that we had seen that. And again, just the way that he managed to get his own shot off, it's not always the prettiest looking shot. He's still refining it. But to be the number 1 overall pick and to be backing it up, major shout out to him. And then finally, listen, I've come to the realization that Patrick Beverley is just a winning basketball player. We've always known he's been scrappy. We've always known he's been a hardworking, feisty, defensive, just nightmare. And he's always been a nuisance defensively, again, in a good way. But that hasn't always necessarily meant that we viewed him as a winning player. But I think that we're starting to see a change in the narrative when it comes to Patrick Beverley, because this is not just someone who you signed to your team for some project. This is a guy that's going to change the culture. He's going to bring a winning culture to your organization. And I think we've started to see now that every single place that he's been, he's kind of been the linchpin to a lot of these good teams that he's been on. Whether it's the Clippers or the Rockets, he's been tremendous. He's been setting the tone. He's been establishing that defensive culture. And I think that most importantly, his enthusiasm, his energy, it's contagious. And he's infused this new sense of confidence and belief in the Minnesota Timberwolves that I think they were lacking. They were lacking an edge. He brought an edge to this team. And that's part of the reason why you're seeing them turn the corner this past year. A lot of these guys, I mean, yes, Anthony Edwards is newer. He's only in his second season. But Karl Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, those 2 guys have been a part of the Minnesota Timberwolves for a while. But what did we always say about Karl Anthony Towns? That he was soft, that he didn't lack that consistent motor and edge to be dominant, to be great. And I think that you have to give a lot of credit, obviously, to the coaching staff, but I think in large part to Patrick Beverley for coming in and kind of changing and altering the course. And so I give him a lot of credit, a lot of credit. But I will say this about the Minnesota Timberwolves, because they do not play the smartest style of basketball. Now, they win games because they've got better athletes. They've got some clutch scorers on the team, but they don't play smart basketball. They took a lot of ill-advised shots yesterday. Pull-up threes in transition. They weren't orchestrating offensive sets. They weren't orchestrating out of the half court. They were going ISO. Now, they made it, so ends up being all good. But long-term, it's hard to win when you're taking just ill-advised shots like that. So Karl Anthony Towns can't be absent if they're going to have any chance of advancing. He scored 11 points, 3 for 11 shooting in 24 minutes, fouled out with 7 minutes left to go in the game. They're going to need him to be available. But again, if D'Angelo Russell can play like he did last night, not obviously 29 points, but if he can play like a borderline all-star with Karl Anthony Towns, with Anthony Edwards. Well, now there'll be a team to contend with, because those two guys have obviously established themselves as guys that you can trust. But again, it'll be interesting to see kind of how far they can go, what types of performances they can get from D'Angelo Russell to pair with Edwards and with Karl Anthony Towns. That to me is going to be the interesting thing. But again, from the Clippers' perspective, I think they still demonstrated the same feistiness, the same scrappiness, the same chemistry, camaraderie, and togetherness that they showed in the postseason last year. They still looked calm and collected even on the road. I still think Ty Lue is arguably the best coach in basketball, one of the top 3 coaches in the NBA today. And yes, I know that they're trying to reintegrate Paul George. I still think that the chemistry that they've built from last year's postseason run is still kind of just muscle memory. But it was surprising that they didn't close this game out, because this is typically the type of game that they would have closed out last year. Now, again, they're not out of it. They still have one more playing game to take on the winner between the Spurs and the Pelicans. But for now, they got to wait and see.